Extraction is directed by Sam Hargrave and stars Chris Hemsworth, and it's produced by the Russo brothers, who gave us the later Avengers films. And this story deals with Chris Hemsworth's character, who is a black market mercenary who's recruited to supposedly make money to basically retrieve a son of India's biggest drug lord. And it has to extract him from Dhaka, Bangladesh. And as you see from the trailers, it becomes a lot more than what meets the eye, because essentially there's also an ongoing war going on with India and these Bangladesh people that are pretty much that are after the boy as well. And it becomes pretty much a race against time for him to try to extract him from Bangladesh. Now, here's a little backstory. Now, this film was directed by Sam Hargrave, who this is actually his first directed film, and this was he's actually had the only other work that he's done is he was a stunt coordinator on Captain America: Civil War and Avengers: Endgame, which were also directed by the Russo brothers. And
probably out of the fighting in this that turned out very well.
Yeah,
I can see why.
Yeah, and he had he had an acting role in Atomic Blonde too. So, but I don't remember him from that much. But he's basically he's collaborated with the Russo brothers. And with this film coming out, being the newest,
back from a previous film they did last year called The 21 Bridges, which turned out being far more better.
Yeah, and this is this Netflix film that I actually was very interested in, but I kind of avoided the trailers just to kind of make sure it wasn't getting spoiled or anything. But from the trailers, when I was about to watch the film, it got me interested because, at least from the vibe, it was good to see that Chris Hemsworth is now trying to branch out from, taking away from time from playing in Thor in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And while he's had some not so good movies in the past that he's tried to branch out with, like Men in Black International and the Vacation reboot, things like that, I still admire that he still tries to get different roles and sometimes tries to branch out. And there are movies that I've seen with him that he actually did seem like he was going to step in that direction, including a couple years ago, he started one called 12 Strong, which was he played a similar military figure in that. And it seems like when he's always playing these type of roles, it was like a 3-step process, because the first time that he played a military type figure was in the remake of Red Dawn, which I heard sucked. And then he got to 12 Strong, which was, you're getting the right direction. And then here upon seeing him in this movie and upon seeing the film, I was like, wow, you really fucking hit a home run with this movie.
Yeah, I will say that when I saw the trailers at first, I was interested, but again, like you were talking about, Chris Hemsworth, his standalone films outside of the Marvel Cinematic Universe hadn't been all that great. Like you were stating, I saw Red Dawn. It was fucking utter trash. I mean, it wasn't just his fault, but he was horrible as well, his performance. Just nothing in that film. Then he did 12 Strong, which was a way step up from Red Dawn. But again, like you stated, it was pretty standard, watered down military movie. And it was actually about, I think it's a true story about Afghan war, Taliban, Al Qaeda. And then again, Vacation and Men in Black International, fucking horrible, both films. And now to see him in this, and not only that, with Netflix, they've been on kind of a hot run, with 6 Underground, which was really good. I like the Ben Affleck film we saw last year; that was pretty decent. And Spencer Confidential wasn't too bad. I thought it was pretty decent. It had problems. And, when I saw the trailers of this, I thought, okay, Chris Hemsworth, Soldier, Netflix. And it seems like that we're getting this trend of these military extraction, mercenary type movies. I felt like, okay, this movie's going to end up being watered down like the same old shit we always see. So I will say that upon seeing this film, I absolutely love this movie. This caught me by surprise. And I will say that Chris Hemsworth gives I'm not going to count the MCU right now. Aside from that, this is his all-time best starring roles.
I agree. It's definitely a film that really quite surprised me. And I can say in a nutshell, this is pretty much the kind of performance that I can say in a respectful way. He basically did what Paul Walker did with what he did Running Scared, taking a more darker, taking a more serious route and trying to, show how much he can be as an actor and stuff instead of his, popular blockbusters that he's in and doing something a lot more grounded. And I think that in a respectful way, he really pulled that off here. And the movie as a whole was actually what I consider a really great like throwback to 90s and early 2000s action films.
Yeah, I
And
will say that Chris Hemsworth, his performance in his film was, I don't know what it was in this one other than the MCU, but it just felt like he really, really tried in this movie. And he gives a raw, emotional performance as well as great coordinated fights. I got to say, that he's a bad motherfucker in this one. And I will tell you right now, when I talk about another pro in this, everybody did really good. His chemistry with the little boy, the like India Bangladesh kid, was awesome. I thought that kid did amazing. That they had great chemistry. I will say that on the fighting standpoint, it was probably some of the best I've seen since John Wick 3. I mean, this is on par with John Wick. I'm telling you, people, this was the coordinating fights were just fucking insane in this movie. This shit shocked the fuck out of me. I could not believe it when I was watching on a Netflix.
I couldn't either. Like this is a film that quite, doesn't hold back on its brutality. And like we were saying, getting our
Yeah.
pros, like it shows a lot of the raw brutalness that these guys that he has to go through in order to basically get the boy out of this area, out of this whole country that they're in. And the stakes they have to go through, I can honestly say that they really push the vulnerability in this to a point that there's a lot of things that are unpredictable because not going to spoil anything, but let's just say there's also some pretty excessive, like brutal shit they do that I couldn't believe they got away with. And I was like, damn, that's on a fucking
Yeah.
Netflix movie too.
Yeah, the brutality is insane in this film. I couldn't believe we were watching kids getting thrown off of buildings. I couldn't believe all the shooting, the eye blowing and back of their heads getting fucking blown off with a fucking gun and just people get crushed with cars. I mean, I was like, oh my God, slow the fuck down. This movie is fucking brutal
Yeah.
beyond recognition. But what I really appreciate also they did was how well they really spent with Chris Hemsworth's character. He's not one dimensional and boring. This guy has a kind of a sad, emotional, raw past, and it has to do with the kid and his wife. And I'm not gonna tell you what happened to him, but let's just say that they build on his emotions real strong, and he's in this predicament because he doesn't give a fuck if he lives or dies. So they kind of give him a Max Payne type of level in this because he really doesn't give a fuck if he dies. He wants to die,
Yeah.
and I love that. I don't know what it was, but it really upped the character he played, and I really got into that. And it is sad, when he goes into explanation with the boy about his past, and you see snippets of dream sequences of it, but you don't get the authentic, what it was until like middle.
Yeah, I like that too. I like that the film was able to carry layers to try to really give like a lot of great depth of who he was. And while it is very limited on what they really spend time with, it does really show a lot of the actual art. Well, not art, but the actual like personality that we get from Chris Hemsworth's character and what he has to go through in this. And also trivia notes, not to spoil anything, but the boy that he meant that we see in like these flashbacks, it's actually Chris Hemsworth's son in real life. So I thought that was kind of cool. Yeah,
that's cool.
So
that's pretty neat. But Chris Hemsworth's character goes through hell in this. I mean, this dude gets fucking shot so many times, stabbed, fucking sliced up, falling out of buildings, getting hit by cars. I mean, and I will say another thing I want to praise in this film that I freaking love that this is becoming a big thing because apparently it's starting to thanks to 1917 is long take scenes. And they actually did what they did with 1917, but not the whole movie. They did it in this long montage of them running, get fighting this one that's kind of playing he's like a anti-villain type guy. Don't want to spoil anything. He's kind of not on their team, but on their team. You just got to see it. Don't want to spoil it. But there's a big long montage of that guy after him while Bangladesh Kingpin sends his soldiers in. So it's like just montages of people, just one take, going through the windows, going under the going with like you're riding behind with them while they're driving in car chases. I mean, it's just fucking insane. You have to see this. It reminded me of 1917 when they did that long one take.
Yes, I agree. I really enjoyed the camera work a lot in this, and this is something. Well, this factors in with speaking of the camera work and the filmmaking. Not only was the tracking shots of them having to go through like this whole apartment building, and they're going through fucking like guys left and right after them and shit, and a whole sequence where it shows them inside the car, and when they get out, it stays on them for almost like about like maybe 10 minutes or so. This sequence goes on for a fucking while, and when they're also getting into the fight scenes, much like John Wick, it's great to see them actually getting into doing wide shots, choreographed at a great T. And it reminds me of so much of how you'd make fight scenes work. Because much like we were saying with the earlier, with how it does a throwback, there were movies that came out in the 80s and 90s that relied on that a lot. And they were able to really craft a lot of their technique with, showing the punches and showing how much like they fucking get into brutal like pain so much to the point that you really feel for the guy, and they don't hold back. This movie just gives you what you want as far as that kind of mentality. And I have to appreciate the stunt work for that too, because when they're going through buildings and stuff and jumping off and things like that, I can really appreciate them actually relying on stunt work over CGI.
Exactly, and I gotta give him praise on that as well. The fight scenes in this film was, like I said earlier, was insane. Like John Wick and Upgrade, if you guys remember that movie with Lee Winnell directed, and those two films are a perfect example of this. Just the way that when they're fighting and the way how they're landing punches, kicks, weapons being landed on people's heads, the way it blends in. Like he used one guy to kick another guy's head off almost.
Yeah,
like the way that all this stuff in, it's just you would expect with a guy with non-experience would done this, it would look real messy. But with this talent of this stunt worker being the director behind the scene, I felt like he knew that, and that's why he captured every little detail of the stunt work, because it shows big time in this film in a good way. I will say that it's actually considered the highest praised thing of the film. It was an amazing stunt work, but yeah, this shit flying out of windows, just one take, one guy get hit, bounced off, and hits another vehicle, and then the camera like follows it, like if you're on the view going up to the person and seeing okay, only to see one guy get kicked out of another window. It's like, holy shit! It doesn't slow down. This is a pace. No. I'll tell you right now, it's a 2-hour movie. I felt like this only lasts an hour and 30 minutes. I was so into this.
I was too. It was perfectly paced with that as well, with how it went along. And one of the other appreciations I give too is the score in the film. I don't know how to describe it, but it's almost like, in a good way, it's kind of like listening to somewhat of a little bit of mix of like Hans Zimmer's music and somewhat a little bit of the guy that composes some of Michael Bay's music on that kind of like epic, intenseful level. And it really comes in handy, especially toward the climax when it takes place on this bridge. And I got to admit, out of the bridge action scenes I've seen in films, this is probably the best one. This is probably the best bridge action set piece I've seen since probably Mission Impossible 3.
Yeah, the final climax is satisfying. It is very sad. It's raw. It's brutal. It does not stop. The intensity just keeps climbing in this film. And I will say that the score is done really well. Like, I agree with you on that. Not to mention the location they captured with Dhaka, Bangladesh. I think they captured the slums of Dhaka, Bangladesh really well in this film. And it's something you do see when you watch YouTube videos, or people that's went to visit Bangladesh in the rough kind of slum parts of it. Mm-hmm. And they captured that very well. And I actually believe they shot a little bit of it there in Thailand. Which wasn't in the movie way.
Yeah.
But anyways, other than that, I I'll tell you right now, there's some things in this film I don't want to talk about because it'll spoil it. But let's just say that they add a couple things to the storyline that you would predict would go one way, but didn't go that way, which was surprisingly good because usually these type of movies lead to that. Justin, you might remember it's a cameo with a certain Netflix star. He came in. Usually that person plays the friend who helps out and ends up actually taking a turn for the worst more than good. And they were close friends. So I'm glad they kind of did that. They added more to the story and not made it too standard.
Yes, I agree with that, and I was questioning it because I'm kind of like a little mixed on it in that they didn't really like spend a whole lot of time with the character with certain things that they could have added with it to really have us dive into what was going on. But I appreciate, yes, the way that it marked out. It was a good twist on having to rely on that aspect for it. And now, if I had to get some of my cons out of the way, I will say that the film, while it is really balls to the wall action, like it is, and it takes more of a kind of a '90s throwback kind of feel, where it was a simple plot and having to deal with kicking things into gear. The movie did feel like we were missing some stuff. We were missing a whole lot of stuff as to a lot as far as writing, like having to build upon why we were having this feud to begin with between the son's father and the whole big villain that's in the film. They don't really spend any type of detail on it, and it really could have been interesting if they maybe gave us more on what was really going on between them and everything, and why all this, what was the whole purpose of really kidnapping the son to begin with, so to speak.
I I agree with you on that. That's one of my biggest cons in the film. Is the whole like they didn't dig any on anything with the because what it is the kid's father's a kingpin from India, and the villain that we follow in this movie is Bangladesh's biggest drug lord. So it's basically they've had feuds, and they kind of really they sum it up in about a couple minutes when the girl talks to Chris Hemsworth about the job he's going to be taking, and that's all we really get. And it's supposed to be this big epic war going on, and we don't know how the father ended up where he was at, and what did the Bangladesh guys get from taking the boy. They don't go in any detail other than it seemed like they struggled at writing on that part. Like, how do we introduce the movie? We got everything else. How do we introduce the movie in? And that's where the issue lies in this film. That's probably the biggest con, the only big con I have. Other than that, it's just more snippet things. Like there was a bad CGI scene where this car gets explodes. You can kind of tell, and the helicopters one. So some of the vehicle explosions did come out kind of bad. But other than that,
I will also say too is that it kind of falls a little bit earlier, like that the reason I was mixed on the character that they come in later with was because of the fact that we didn't really get a whole lot of what was going on with everything between him and that character. But that's just a minor thing because I like the way it played out as far as that twist. But other than that, really, I mean, it's the.
Are you talking about the other Netflix famous cameo? Mm-hmm. Because the other guy that's in this film, his thing actually came out to make more sense. I get that story, and I want to talk about it so bad, but it will spoil it, so I'm going to lay off of it. But there's actually a cool twist with that, not just some standard, bullshit they added on to the story. But right, I know I will say that one scene where that cameo with that guy and Chris Hemsworth was actually kind of funny in one scene. The part where Chris Hemsworth is popping Oxycontin, and he goes, and then that guy goes, "Oh, my leg's hurting. I need one."
Yeah,
he did deliver one little funny little, chuckle laugh. And he's when you guys see the movie, you'll know who it is, and you'll understand what I mean by he comes off as real funny, but he actually does something dark and he twists. Usually, I was worried at first that he was going to be the guy who saves the day or helps them out, like you've seen in other films, like I've seen in like the Pierce Brosnan and Owen Wilson movie.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I thought it was going to go with that, with a typical friend that lived there will save him. I'm glad it took it to a darker tone, like a different direction. So I was glad on that. Other than that, I will say that what a hell of a movie. This was awesome. We got Six Underground recently. That was fucking great. Got this. Spencer Confidential could have been better, but it was all right. It just seems like Netflix they're pushing out some pretty good movies lately in the action genre. So with that being said, I don't think the movie is unbelievably phenomenal, but I'm going to give it some credit here. So I'm going to go with high compelling grade on the Film Freaks meter.
I agree. I'm giving it definitely a high compelling grade on the Film Freaks meter as well. If you're into a lot of like a more kind of like on level as far as John Wick movies or movies at least from the 90s that are on that kind of level, so to speak, you might probably I would definitely check it out. And hell, in a good light, there are some aspects that I can kind of appreciate because it kind of reminds me a little bit of, well, in some slight regard, it's kind of like watching a throwback to Tony Scott's directed films like Man on Fire and or Last Boy Scout or something.
Exactly.
So yeah, for those of you who have also seen Extraction, let us know in the comments below what you thought about it, and stay safe. And we hope you have a wonderful rest of your nights, and we'll see y'all later.
See ya.